Hello, everyone. This is Professor Hasselman, and this week's discussions are going to be on the social and economic change in the 18th century. Now, the end of the bubonic plague and the absence of devastating wars opened the door to significant changes in society and economy during the 1700s, and we've already talked about the scientific revolution in past weeks on these new breakthroughs in science and military control. Now, population growth skyrocketed and also created an unprecedented demand for food. Now, this in turn spurred an agricultural revolution in which land was improved and transformed into viable farmland. Now, meanwhile, the rise of the cottage industry, or the production of goods in the home rather than in the factory, or controlled by guilds, fueled the growth of manufacturing and urbanization. Now, at the same time, European nations created an Atlantic economy that centered upon the African slave trade, New World plantation production, and European textiles and manufactured goods. Now, one of the things that you'll focus on in this section is the development of the agricultural and industrial revolutions, specifically in Britain. And we often refer to Britain as the birthplace or the takeoff point of the agricultural revolution and also the industrial revolution. Now, in Eric Hobsbawm's The Age of Revolutions, focusing mostly on the time period from 1789 to 1848, Hobsbawm focuses particularly on the role of Britain during the Industrial Revolution, but also says that it's not just Britain that we have to focus on. Similar to what Neil Ferguson is writing about in his Civilization, the West and the Rest, where science and innovation was very prevalent outside of Europe and outside of the West, but some things provided for the ability for the West to succeed and to overcome the issues that the other nations and other civilizations were dealing with. Now, in his work, I'm going to read a couple of paragraphs here. Eric Hobsbawm looks at the reasons for the Industrial Revolution. He says, this is on page 28 of his work, the chapter entitled The Industrial Revolution. It says, "Nevertheless, it is as well to consider it first for two reasons. First, because in fact it broke out, and in this case he's talking about the Industrial Revolution, to use a question-begging phrase, before the Bastille was stormed." Okay, so this week we're going to be talking about the Industrial Revolution, and then next week you'll be reading about political revolution. So he says there's something important about the fact that the Industrial Revolution broke out before political revolutions. And second, because without it, the Industrial Revolution, we cannot understand the impersonal groundswell of history on which the more obvious men and events of our period were born, the uneven complexity of its rhythm. So there's not like this idea that it's an ever-advancing movement, but there's going to be some abrupt changes in society. Now, he continues and says, what does the phrase, the Industrial Revolution broke out, mean? Now, it means that sometime in the 1780s, and for the first time in human history, the shackles were taken off the productive power of human societies, which henceforth became capable of the constant, rapid, and up to the present limitless multiplication of men, goods, and services. This is now technically known to the economists as the take-off into self-sustained growth. Now, no previous society had been able to break through the ceiling which a pre-industrial social structure, defective science and technology, and consequently periodic breakdown, famine, and death imposed on production. The takeoff was not, of course, one of those phenomena which, like earthquakes and large meteors, take the non-technical world by surprise. Its prehistory in Europe can be traced back, depending on the taste of the historian and his particular range of interest, to about AD 1000, if not before, and earlier attempts to leap into the air, clumsy as the experiments of young ducklings, have been flattered with the nature of industrial revolution in the 13th century, in the 16th, and the last decades of the 17th. So he's saying that this revolution wasn't immediate. It had been going on for a while, but something definitely changed during this time period. Now he goes on and says, to call this process the Industrial Revolution is both logical and in line with a well-established tradition. Though there was at one time a fashion among conservative historians, perhaps due to a certain shyness in the presence of incendiary concepts, to deny its existence, this existence of a revolution in industry, and substitute instead platitudinous terms like accelerated evolution. Now, if the sudden qualitative and fundamental transformation which happened in or about the 1780s was not a revolution, then the word has no common sense meaning. Now, the Industrial Revolution was not indeed an episode with a beginning and an end, according to Hobsbawm, and to ask when it was complete is senseless, for its essence was that henceforth revolutionary change became the norm. And this is going to be common in both in industry and in politics, beginning in the 19th century and then moving forward into the 20th century. Now, he continues, by any reckoning, this was probably the most important event in world history, at any rate since the invention of agriculture and cities. Now, remember, agriculture and cities were developed nearly 9 to 10,000 years ago. So a lot of stuff has been going on in this meantime, and this is probably the most important, he says, in this time period. And, he says, it was initiated by Britain. That this was not fortuitous is evident, he says. If there was to be a race of pioneering the Industrial Revolution in the 18th century, there was really only one starter. There was plenty of industrial and commercial advance, he says, fostered by the intelligent and economically far from naive ministers and civil servants. But whatever the British advance was due to, it was not scientific and technologically superior. In the natural sciences, the French had been just as superior as others, but for some reason, fortunately, refinements during this time period allowed Britain to succeed. And as you do your reading, you'll be able to see why Britain was able to succeed in the manner that it does. Now, in addition to the Industrial Revolution, many changes were wrought in the domestic sphere as well. So this is not just the sphere of the elite and the industrialists, but there was something going on in domestic culture as well. New developments in the structure of European society and economy in the 18th century had a significant impact upon marriage, family, medicine, nutrition, and even religious beliefs. Now, with the rise of manufacturing, many European women began to work, and this altered patterns of marriage and childbearing. Improved diet, better medicine translated into a longer lifespan for many Europeans. And also, as nation-states became increasingly consolidated throughout Europe, the vernacular, or the regional or national language or dialect, was increasingly emphasized in both schools and churches. Now, aside from what I've discussed earlier, in this unit we'll also consider how and why European population growth, agricultural transformations, new development in manufacturing, and the rise of an Atlantic economy were so interconnected. And we will also see how manufacturing and the agricultural revolution influenced Europeans' daily lives and belief systems. Now, upon successful completion of this unit, you should be able to identify the long-term changes that brought about the Industrial Revolution, describe the effects of economic changes on everyday life in the 18th century Europe, and also define the major features of the economic theories of the time period.